You're fired. And next time, don't touch what you can't afford. That was the last thing Sarah Jennings heard before her badge was ripped from her apron and tossed into a trash bin beside a $1 million Bentley. The car wasn't hers. She didn't even touch it. But the woman in white fur misses. Gilda Shore, diamond earrings, red heels, cruelty layered in perfume pointed straight at her. She smudged my rearview mirror, Gilda had said. Bakadum. Cold, deliberate, discerning. Sarah was on her knees, wiping the base of the valet stanchion like she had every Friday night. She barely glanced at the car. But none of that mattered. Not when someone rich pointed. Not when a manager needed someone to blame. The valet cameras didn't roll. The guests didn't protest. And her manager, he leaned in, voice low enough to hide the shame, loud enough to wound. We'll mail your last check. You can leave through the kitchen. Sarah stood still, her hands trembling around a damp rag. Her reflection warped in the polished door panel of the car that ended her job and maybe her future. From a nearby table, someone snapped a photo, the kind that ends up online with a caption like, "Waitress fired for touching, a Bentley should she sue." Sarah didn't say a word. But that night, for the first time in her life, she didn't walk away. Because by tomorrow, the same billionaire who drove that Bentley would hire her as his personal assistant. And the woman who had her fired, she wouldn't see it coming. Sarah smoothed the front of her blouse and stepped inside Juno's Brew, the kind of cafe with reclaimed wood counters, Edison bulbs dangling low like thoughtful punctuation, and chalkboard menus announcing fair trade intentions in careful handwriting. She liked the smell, warm milk and burnt espresso, honest and unpretentious. For the first time in days, she allowed herself a quiet hope. Not a big one, just the kind that fits inside a folded resume. A man in his early 30s stepped out from the back office, holding her application like it might still be damp. "Miss Jennings," he asked, scanning the first page. His tone was polite, polished even, but practiced. He glanced up. Eyes took in her shoes first, then the second-hand satchel, then her face, Iro 101 ante. "I see you worked at Le Valet," he said, flipping the page. "That's Surnam, Chester." Impressive. Her lips parted slightly. 4 years. No days off during holidays. "I trained 3 of their floor supervisors." He nodded slowly. "Right, turn you one, and you were recently let go." Her fingers stiffened. "There was an incident with a guest car. I didn't touch it, but..." He raised one palm gently, like a traffic cop stopping an invisible car. "I don't need the details. It's just... this kind of thing doesn't go away fast. You know, our regulars lawyers, finance types, they read the news. They forward things." Sarah felt her pulse thud once in her neck. Then again, the manager offered a soft smile. The kind people give when they're already walking away in their minds. "We're a small place. No HR department. Just trying to keep the peace." There wasn't anything else to say. She nodded, muttered a quiet thank you, and turned to leave. Her resume remained on the counter, a quiet reminder that paper can't outshout rumor. Outside, the sky had darkened. The glass door clicked shut behind her with the gentlest sound, but it echoed louder than any slam. She reached into her tote, not to check her phone, but just to do something with her hands. They were starting to shake again, just slightly like they always did after someone said no without really saying no. The city bus jolted forward, its brakes sighing under the weight of tired bodies and late paychecks. Sarah sat near the middle, one hand gripping the steel pole beside her, the other resting on her lap, over a paper bag with a single sandwich inside, the kind with too much lettuce and not enough meat. She wore a beige sweater, clean but faded, and kept her eyes low, like the cracked floor tiles of the bus might offer some version of safety. Her phone buzzed twice in her pocket. She didn't check. She knew it wasn't a job offer. It hadn't been in days. 2 seats ahead, a teenage boy shifted sideways and raised his phone discreetly, the lens catching Sarah's profile. He whispered to the girl next to him, smirking like he just spotted a rare animal at the zoo. Yo, check it," he murmured, and hit the red button. For a live, knife or nostril, whatever 9 viewers, the caption blinked onto the screen. From waitress to worthless, guess who's on my bus? Behind her, someone laughed. Not cruelly. Just lightly. Just enough to sting. Sarah didn't move. But she saw the phone in the reflection of the window angled just enough to show her slouched posture, the sag in her shoulders, the absence of anything that once resembled fight. A few viewers joined. Comments popped up. Is that the Bentley chick? I thought she got arrested, LOL. Nah, she just got fired. Rich lady made her cry or something. Imagine being that broke and clumsy. The bus hit a pothole. The phone shook. The boy chuckled. Sarah slowly turned her head, not to confront, not to argue, but just to look. Just once. The boy flinched slightly. Not from guilt, but from the realization that the woman he mocked was still human enough to notice. She said nothing. Just stared. One heartbeat. Two, wait, tinain. Then turned away again. The comments kept coming, but the video ended. Not because he felt bad, but because the silence made things awkward. Sarah reached into the paper bag and tore a corner of the sandwich. She wasn't hungry anymore, but chewing gave her something to do, something other than cry. The job fair was held in a high school gymnasium, long fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, banners for Work Ready 2025 peeling slightly at the corners. Tables lined the walls, each one promising opportunity printed in bold fonts and empty enthusiasm. Sarah walked past a booth handing out lanyards and pens with fake smiles. Her shoes squeaked slightly on the gym floor, damp from the outside rain. She kept her head high, her resume copies flat in a manila folder under her arm. She had ironed her shirt that morning twice. A woman in cream heels and a camel coat was standing near the security desk. She didn't belong here. Too polished, too deliberate. Sarah didn't recognize her at first until she dropped her designer clutch. Reflex took over. Sarah stepped forward, bent down, and picked it up. "Excuse me," she said, offering it politely. The woman turned. Gilda, der Röhren. Her smile was as wide as ever, but her eyes were razor thin. "Oh," she said, as if seeing something unexpected crawling across the floor. "It's you." "It's you, Wax." Before Sarah could respond, a firm hand gripped her shoulder. "Ma'am," came the voice of a security guard. "We received a call someone matching your description was seen attempting theft. Please step outside with me." What Sarah blinked. She just dropped it." "I didn't see anything," Gilda said sweetly, her voice soft as honey poured over broken glass. "I'm just glad I got my purse back." The guard's grip tightened. People were watching. A girl from the career booth lifted her phone, hesitated, then hit record. "I didn't take anything," Sarah said again, her voice brittle. "I saw her help," a voice called out. From behind the guard came a scruffy older man in a knit beanie and oversized coat. Frank. The homeless man from the block near Le Valet. "She didn't steal," he said, stepping forward. "I saw her pick it up the second it hit the floor." The guard paused. Gilda's face twitched just slightly. She hadn't planned on witnesses. Sarah looked at Frank. He gave a small nod. Then he disappeared into the crowd like fog. She stood still, again. A dozen phones had captured the moment. But no one said anything. No apologies. No questions. Just silence. The crowd thinned out like fog dissolving in sunlight, but the air around Sarah remained heavy. She didn't move right away. Not because she couldn't, but because there was nothing left to rush toward her. No table to return to. No apology to accept. Just the echo of false accusation clinging to her skin. She stepped away from the security desk. Not toward the exit. Toward nowhere in particular. Her legs moved as if following muscle memory, not will. Gilda's laugh trailed behind her like perfume synthetic, cloying, manufactured for power. Sarah found herself in a side hallway between the gym and the front lobby. The tiles were off-white, sterile. A janitor's cart stood motionless at the end of the corridor, its presence oddly grounding. She leaned against the wall not to rest, but to anchor herself. Her pulse wasn't racing anymore. It had slowed, settled. The kind of quiet that comes not from peace, but from impact. Like a car after the crash. In the glass trophy case beside her, Her own reflection appeared not fully, just enough. Her eyes looked older, her jaw more set. Behind her, golden plaques declared names of students who'd won awards in science, leadership, public speaking. She'd once wanted her name on a plaque. Now she was a headline with no article, a warning with no crime. She inhaled slowly through her nose, then out. Her fingers didn't shake. In fact, they were too still, curled gently at her sides, as if her body had decided it no longer needed permission to protect her dignity. Someone passed behind her. She didn't look. Someone whispered, "That's her, I think," and kept walking. Sarah didn't turn, didn't speak. She simply blinked, stepped away from the wall, and kept walking. But her footsteps were different now. Not louder, not faster, just Herzedre Hinhersel. Tomorrow someone would offer her a chance, and someone else would try to rip it away. The streets hummed with the friction of a city never quite sleeping. Sarah stood alone near the corner of 8th and Jackson, beneath the glow of a street lamp whose flicker had long given up on being fixed. She wasn't waiting for a bus. Not really. She was waiting for time to pass, for humiliation to wear off, for something inside her to settle. She stared across the street at the row of parked cars. Ordinary. Sutter Submarine. Dusty West on the one. Then one vehicle stood out, not because it was loud, but because it wasn't. A black Bentley. No vanity plate. No logos. Just quiet, expensive power. Its back door opened with a hiss. Out stepped a man in a tailored gray coat. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, with that unbothered elegance that money doesn't buy, it trains. He didn't walk so much as exist in motion, like someone accustomed to being on time without ever checking a watch. He didn't look at her right away. Just stood near the curb, speaking briefly to the driver, who remained inside. Then, as if sensing her gaze through the dark, he turned. Sarah looked away instinctively, then back. Too late to pretend. He approached slowly, not like a man crossing a street, but like someone making a decision with every step. When he stopped in front of her, there was a pause, measured. Almost. Respectful. "You used to work at Trenton Diner, didn't you?" he asked. His voice was calm, slightly textured, like gravel softened by age. Sarah blinked. "Yes, Sarah Shokuniamo. How did you—" "I was in the back booth with Waitress 3 years ago. August. You brought me water before I passed out." Her mind scrambled for the image. A man sweaty, slumped, coughing into his sleeve, too proud to ask for help. She'd thought he was homeless, or hungover. "I didn't think you remembered," she said quietly. "I do," he replied. "You didn't ask questions. You didn't post a video. You just helped. That's rare." He reached into his coat and pulled out a card. No flourish, just a simple handoff. "Call me," he said. "If you still believe in decency." She took the card. Slowly, Isakaki, Resiyamin. Read the name. Richard Langston, CEO, Langston Corp. The letters shimmered under the streetlight. Her fingers traced the edges like they might vanish. Sarah looked up. "Are you offering me a job?" He smiled. Not wide, not kind, just knowing. "I'm offering a conversation, one that doesn't start with what went wrong." Then he turned and walked back to the car. No handshake, no promises, just an invitation. The Bentley pulled away, its taillights glowing like eyes fading into the night. Sarah stood alone again, but it felt different this time. Not because something had changed, but because something might. She looked down at the card once more, then tucked it deep into her bag. Not her pocket, not her hand. Somewhere it could rest without pressure. Across the street, a curtain shifted. On the third floor of the brick building opposite, a woman moved away from the window, phone still warm in her hand. She had seen everything, and she wasn't smiling. Sarah thought it was a moment of grace, but some people were already preparing for her to fail. The wind had picked up. Sarah crossed to the other side of the street, her coat wrapped tight with one hand, the other still pressed against the inside of her bag. She didn't pull out the business card immediately. She didn't need to. She could feel its edges, firm, deliberate, too sharp to be accidental. She walked without looking up, past shuttered shops, past flickering neon signs that promised open but hadn't been true in years. Her breath rose in quiet puffs. The night was colder than before, but not because of the weather. She stopped near a chain-link fence outside an abandoned bookstore. Under the yellow cast of a streetlight, she finally pulled it out. Langston Corp. The letters were etched, not printed, tactile, like they'd been meant to be touched, not just read. She stared at the name Richard Langston. And then, as if the memory had been waiting behind her eyes all this time, the sound came rushing back, the wheeze of a man gasping in a tiled restroom, the buzz of a flickering light overhead, the weight of his head in her hands. She hadn't asked for gratitude. She hadn't thought she'd ever see him again. It had been one of those moments you file away as decent, but never destiny. Yet here she was. She turned the card over. Nothing written on the back. No secret note. No promise. Still, it felt like more than a chance. She exhaled slowly and closed her eyes. Not in relief, in calibration. Because tomorrow, she would walk into a building that didn't expect her, speak to a man who owed her nothing, and sit across from someone who believed she didn't belong. But she wouldn't walk in as a waitress. Not anymore. She had once saved him in silence. Now, silence would be the only thing protecting her from what was coming. The doors of Langston Corp didn't open, they parted. Seamless, silent, as if even the glass had been taught discretion. Sarah stepped through with her shoulders squared and her breath carefully measured. The lobby was cathedral-like stone floors that swallowed sound, vertical lights that ran up the walls like glowing veins, a digital waterfall looping behind the reception desk. Everything here whispered money, not new money, not loud money. Legacy. She approached the counter. The receptionist wore a headset and a charcoal blazer. She didn't smile, but her voice was warm. Name at Prometa Suri Kunmei. Sarah Jennings. I have a 9 a.m. with Mr. Langston. We weren't wounded Mana Suri Kennedy. The woman typed without looking. He's expecting you. You'll be on the 43rd floor? Top button on the elevator will light for you. As Sarah stepped into the glass elevator, the door closed with a soft hiss. For a moment, she could see her reflection blurred over the city skyline behind her. Below, the lobby faded into distance. People moved like miniatures. The elevator didn't jolt. It rose. Smooth, controlled, like the building wanted to prove it could carry her without effort, but not without cost. At floor 43, the doors opened to a silence that was deliberate. Dark wood paneling, frosted glass walls, a long hallway with recessed lighting that led to a single door at the end. A secretary stood waiting beside it, tablet in hand, posture straight. Miss Jennings. Mr. Langston is ready for you. This way. Sarah nodded once. Her shoes clicked faintly on the floor as she walked. Each step sounded sharper than the last. Like punctuation in a sentence she hadn't finished writing. She reached the door. It was closed. The handle was metal cool under her fingertips. She inhaled once. The kind of breath people take when they don't know if they're about to be hired, humiliated, or forgotten again. Then she opened the door. The room was large, but not in the way that comforted. It had height, silence, and stillness. Three things that never offered warmth. A long window ran across the back wall, giving the illusion that whoever sat in this office could see everything below. Because they could, Sarah stepped inside and stopped. At the far end of the room stood Richard Langston, but she didn't look at him first. Because to his left, sitting casually in a cream leather chair, legs crossed, manicure perfect, was Gilda Shore. The same white fur, the same red heels, the same expression superiority dipped in charm. Sarah, Richard said calmly, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. Sarah sat slowly, her movements deliberate like she had to prove she belonged by the way she pulled out a chair. Richard remained standing, hands behind his back. I wanted to speak with both of you together, he began. Because this is an unusual situation. Gilda tilted her head slightly, like someone trying to hide a smirk. Richard continued, I'm in need of a personal executive assistant. Trusted, discreet, efficient. It's not just about skills, it's about instinct. Alignment, Ereki mes intuant. He looked at both women. And timing, Sarah's throat was dry. She didn't dare speak. Gilda broke the silence first. I assumed I was already being onboarded, she said with a soft laugh. Like the whole conversation was for show. But I understand formalities. Richard didn't smile. You're both here for the same position. Only one will leave with it. Sarah finally blinked. Answer them slowly. This wasn't a meeting. It was a showdown. Gilda uncrossed her legs slowly, like the room was hers to stretch in. Then she reached into her designer tote and pulled out a leather-bound portfolio, placing it gently on the table between them with the same care someone might use for a diamond case. I brought my credentials, she said, flipping it open to a page marked with gilded tabs. Executive Vice President at Shore & Penner. Oversaw 3 M&A deals totaling $4 billion. I ran logistics for the Archer Gala while coordinating 2 separate international teams. I know discretion. I know pressure. And I know how to keep powerful men from distractions. The last sentence hung in the air like a perfume no one wanted to name. Sarah didn't move. Her hands rested on her knees still, visible. She had nothing in front of her. No folder. No awards. No curated history. She, Gilda continued, gesturing without turning, was a waitress who got fired for touching the wrong car. Richard didn't respond. He didn't look at either woman. He walked slowly to the window and stood with his back to them, hands in his pockets. Gilda went on. I don't mean that unkindly. But let's be honest. Richard, this role requires more than kindness. It needs teeth, foresight, access. Sarah finally spoke. I'm not here because I want access, she said quietly. Gilda turned, eyebrow raised. I'm here because I didn't ask for anything when I had the chance to. Richard's head turned slightly, just enough to catch her in the corner of his eye. But she didn't even follow up, Gilda countered. You gave her a card she waited days. Doesn't that tell you something? Sarah met Gilda's gaze, calm as stone. It tells me I don't chase people. I show up. There was a pause, longer than comfortable. Richard turned from the window. No expression. No verdict. Only I've made my decision. I'm going with Gilda. The room didn't echo. It absorbed the words completely like they had already been decided long before either woman stepped in. Sarah felt her knees steadying instead of shaking. That surprised her. The world didn't spin. It just dulled. She didn't look at Gilda, but she felt the smile. The kind of smile people say for private victories. The kind that slips behind words like, I appreciate your confidence, and this will be a very productive relationship. Sarah stood quietly. Her chair scraped slightly, but she didn't flinch. Thank you for the opportunity, she said. Her voice didn't crack. That surprised her too. Maybe she was beyond cracking. She turned toward the door. Behind her, Gilda's voice landed softly but perfectly aimed. And Sarah, thank you for polishing the car. It really did shine afterward. Sarah didn't stop. Her hand reached for the door handle, fingers closing. Then it opened before she could pull. A young assistant stepped in, breath clipped, phone in hand. Mr. Langston, sorry for the interruption. We just received a legal email, someone named Frank Carpenter, represented by Carter and Rowe. There's a video attached. Richard turned, arms unfolding slowly. Frank, who? Frank Carpenter says he witnessed an incident involving Miss Jennings and Miss Shore. Miss Shore, job fair. Video footage. For the first time, Gilda's posture shifted. Barely. But her heels whispered against the marble floor like they were trying to back away before she did. Richard took the phone. Tapped once. The video began. No one spoke. And this time, silence wasn't neutral. It was waiting to turn. The video was shaky at first, tilted, low to the ground. The kind of footage that usually ended up dismissed. But then it steadied. And in that frame, under the cold lights of the job fair, the truth unraveled with surgical clarity. It showed a purse falling, not thrown, not wrestled, simply dropped. Sarah bent to retrieve it. Gilda stood beside her, eyes already glancing sideways just seconds before a uniformed security guard entered the frame from the edge, as if summoned on cue. No struggle, no hesitation. Just an accusation crafted from placement and timing. Sarah didn't speak. Neither did Richard. Not yet. The room held its breath. Gilda shifted. "This is out of context," she said, voice a shade too bright. "Anyone could cut a video too." Richard raised one hand. Not sharp, not harsh, but final. He studied the screen for another second, then looked up not at her, but at Sarah. His expression unreadable, but the silence around him said enough. "I'm changing my decision," he said calmly. "Effective immediately." Gilda's mouth parted. A sound almost formed but didn't. "Sarah," Richard continued, "the position is yours." And still, Sarah didn't move. Not because she was stunned, but because her stillness had now become her strength. In the hallway behind them, a staffer from the PR team gasped audibly. One of the board advisors originally scheduled to meet with Gilda was already whispering into his phone. The Langston Corp live stream, still running from earlier, now had 52,000 viewers and counting. Comments flickered by the second justice served Liv. "This assistant deserves a CEO seat." Waitress turned queen. The assistant who had first brought in the phone was now standing frozen by the door, eyes wide, still streaming. Richard gave one small nod toward security. "Escort Miss Shore out of the building." It wasn't a shout. It wasn't even angry, but it was irreversible. Gilda took a step back. "You can't be serious," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "This is ridiculous. She's nothing." The guards approached. Gilda stood for a moment, her hands suspended in confusion. The kind that only happens when someone used to winning can no longer control the rules. She turned to Sarah. "This isn't how this ends." But Sarah remained still. Not frozen, grounded. Because when the world had already taken everything from you in public, redemption didn't need applause. It just needed a door to open and someone powerful enough to hold it. By the time Gilda stepped into the executive elevator, escorted by 2 members of Langston Corp's internal security, the damage had already rippled through 5 departments and at least 3 newsrooms. What began as a quiet internal meeting had detonated into a corporate reckoning, broadcasted live, dissected in real time, replayed across every major platform. Her stilettos clicked once on the marble before the elevator doors swallowed her from view. No one moved. No one stopped her. But no one spoke for her either. Downstairs, the main lobby, which just hours earlier had held polished silence, now buzzed with reporters who weren't supposed to arrive until next quarter's shareholder briefing. They'd come for a ribbon cutting. They stayed for an exposure. Across HR, PR, and legal, inboxes exploded with subject lines like, "Gilda Shore footage verified. Did the assistant just get promoted live? Please advise statement or silence." But the truth didn't need statements. It already had a stream count. In the executive press room, Sarah stood quietly off stage while Richard adjusted the podium himself, an act that stunned 2 veteran assistants. Behind them, a digital banner refreshed with a new title, "Langston Legacy Power Through Decency." When Richard introduced her not with pomp, but with clarity, it wasn't her name alone that landed. It was the phrasing, "Sarah Jennings, Chief Executive Assistant to the CEO and our first official appointment under the Kindness Legacy Fund." No applause yet, just stillness. Then camera shutters. Then the ripple, "Serminary de Reformons." In the audience sat board members who, days earlier, hadn't bothered to read her file. One of them, the same woman who once whispered, "From waitress to worthless," under her breath in the elevator, now leaned forward, visibly mouthing, "She's the real deal." Reporters raised hands. A Bloomberg stringer asked, "Sarah, what would you say to those who still think you don't belong in this room?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. She let the room breathe. "Then I'd say some people inherit power. Others earn the right to carry it and remember how it feels in their hands." There was no need to say more. Because behind her, a second monitor flickered to life, showcasing footage of Frank Carpenter, cleaner shirt, freshly trimmed beard, standing at the job fair stage, now an official ambassador for Langston's community hiring program. In the same corner he'd once been ignored, he now spoke into a microphone loud, clear, real. She didn't just help me. She believed me when no one else would. I told the truth because someone finally stood still long enough to hear it. The room exhaled. For the first time, Sarah smiled, not wide, not forced, just enough to hold ground. And in the front row, a junior employee who had once laughed at her viral clip now nudged his colleague and whispered, "Yo, we just watched her get fired for touching a car, and now she owns the damn building's silence." Richard didn't add anything else. He didn't need to. He stepped back and let the room belong to her. A week passed. Not quietly, but not with noise either. It passed in the way change often does quietly at first, until the ripples reached places they were never meant to go. At the front of Langston Corp's headquarters, the steel-lettered sign that had stood unchanged for 12 years was finally updated. A new plaque sat beneath it, smaller, but heavier in tone. It read, "Langston Legacy Fund, founded in service, not sympathy." It wasn't just decorative. It came with an internal shift so real that people could feel it in the way the elevator doors opened faster. The security guards nodded slower, and the assistants no longer carried clipboards like shields. Sarah didn't redecorate her new office. She kept the same desk, the same window. But she had the nameplate now, and the door had been refinished not because she asked, but because someone from facilities said it deserved to look like it was made for someone who earned it. On her second Friday in the role, she stood in the lobby beside Richard Langston, not as an employee trailing behind, but as someone the cameras framed first. A line formed, not of press, not of donors, but of applicants. People who had once been dismissed for being too much, too tired, too poor, or too complicated. A man with oil-stained knuckles stepped forward to hand in a resume. He didn't speak, but his eyes said he'd watched the live stream a dozen times. A woman in her 60s clutched a folder like it was hope printed in ink. She wore the same shoes Sarah had worn the day she was fired. And then, from the back, came Frank. But not in a coat stitched with winter. In a suit that didn't try too hard. With a badge that read Langston Community Hiring, Senior Outreach Fellow. He greeted each person in line, called them by name if he knew them, shook hands where eyes hesitated. And beside Sarah stood a child 10 years old, shy, with scuffed sneakers and a bright red backpack. His mother had been hired just that morning. The boy held an envelope. Inside it, the first letter confirming a scholarship from the Langston Legacy Youth Fund. He didn't understand the policy terms. He didn't need to. He looked up at Sarah, then said, "Are you the lady from the video?" Sarah smiled, not because she was proud, but because she remembered being small and watching people pretend they didn't see her. She knelt down, looked the boy in the eye, and said, "I'm the lady who stayed." There were no speeches, but the room clapped anyway. Not like an audience, more like a pulse. Outside, a digital billboard once rented for ad campaigns now displayed a single frame. A photo of Sarah Jennings in the Langston atrium helping an elderly applicant fill out paperwork. Captioned simply, "Respect begins where excuses end." And under that, smaller, "Kindness isn't charity. It's structure." It didn't happen overnight. No change ever does. But this time, someone stayed long enough to become undeniable. Sarah didn't raise her voice. She didn't fight with fury. She simply showed up again and again until truth didn't have a choice but to look her in the eye. And now the world had to decide what to do with a woman it once erased. So we ask you if you had been in that room, when silence fell heavy, when the rich woman smiled, when the video played, what would you have done? Would you have believed her? Would you have stood with her? Have you ever seen someone like Sarah before at your job, in a waiting room, behind a cash register and looked away? Tell us. In the comments, the Rinawala the Soranin. Right now, Soranawanda the Shuri Gu. Because someone else is watching. And maybe they need your voice to stay standing. Stay until the end. The twist will redefine what redemption truly means. Have you ever witnessed a quiet injustice like this? Tell us your story in the comments. Subscribe to Unveiled Wealth, where kindness sparks redemption and silence breaks power.